Welcome, everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small, my co-moderator. This is our 131st meeting that we've had consecutively. Thank you to everyone who has been a participant in this forum, in this discussion process over 131 weeks. And if you are new to this process, welcome. Please introduce yourself during the open discussion period in the second half of this meeting. We welcome newcomers. Let us know where you're from, if you're with an organization, if you have any initiatives or ideas or reflections. We'd love to hear from you. Please join us during that time. I like to remind people as well why we created this forum 131 weeks ago. It's useful just to set ourselves in this mindset as we get going today. We did this in order to bring the entire peace movement together from whatever walks of life that you're coming from, whatever philosophy or religion or nation or language, to come together around the concept of true peace in the world. And if you are for that, then you are welcome here. We want to coordinate our activities through our various organizations, political parties, what have you, in order to make this idea possible. And I'm sure, as many of you know, there are people who would like to see, who would not like to see people of many different philosophies working together to make this happen. And they've made quite a good effort to keep us from communicating. So please take a moment to share this invitation with your organizations. If you're on Zoom or YouTube or wherever you're watching this from right now, please share the invitation to join. And we welcome people to be part of this process. To start us off today, we have Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga.
Yes, hello to all of you. Thank you for introducing me. Well, I can start off with, on the one side, some really excellent news and unfortunately some very bad news. But let me start with the very encouraging developments around the state visit of President Putin in India. And I know that we have Mrs. Purnina speaking after me, so I will not go into all the details, but I can only say that the importance of that visit is historic, it's strategic, and I think when President Putin and Prime Minister Modi reiterated their deep friendship, and when Putin said that he is as close friends with China and Russia, I'm absolutely sure that the soul of Prime Minister Primakov, wherever he may be right now, was extremely happy, because already in the end of the 90s, he had called for the China-India-Russia coordination and partnership. And if you look at the three countries, they indeed represent a majority of, not all the people, but a good majority of representing the global majority of the world. And I'm sure that the various Rumpelstiltskin in the various capitals, especially of Europe these times, probably were busy ripping themselves in the middle of anger. But what was the most important, naturally, Prime Minister Modi received Putin at the airplane, which is very unusual and a great honor. And then they drove in the car of Modi to their first destination. Then it is reported that the most important event of the 2 days visit was the private discussion between Putin and Modi. And obviously we will not know everything about that, but there were a lot of treaties and deals basically on the 2030 goal. Indian-Russian cooperation until 2030 has been agreed upon. Many areas of cooperation, and basically Modi described this partnership between Russia and India as a guiding star of international relations. Putin, on his side, mentioned the many thousands years of history of the culture and civilization of India. And then there was a state banquet hosted by President Bulmu. So I think that this is definitely, despite all efforts by, the imperial forces of the world to divide India away from Russia, putting sanctions on India, trying all kinds of things to pull India over in the camp of the so-called democracies. This obviously has not functioned. And, this combination naturally means that the whole idea of a global NATO is at least severely weakened by this renewed friendship between India and Russia. Now, this is obviously extremely important given the fact that, unfortunately, despite the fact that the situation on the ground in Ukraine is lost, according to all experts following this in great detail, this war is lost, and any effort to prolong it will just result in the continuous dying and killing and suffering of a lot of people. But that does not prevent certain forces of the so-called coalition of the willing to try to, create an escalation. And I think the most outrageous and infamous development of the last several days was an article which was given already in October by the Italian Admiral Cavo Dragone. However, the Financial Times choose to only publish this article, I think, on the 2nd of December, obviously trying to sabotage the ongoing peace negotiations between Russia and the United States on the issue of Ukraine. So what this Admiral Dragone in this interview basically said is that, at a certain point, given the so-called hybrid warfare conducted by Russia against NATO, it could come to a situation where NATO has to launch a, quote, preemptive attack on Russia. Now, that was immediately answered very harshly by various Russian sources, I think, including President Putin himself, who said that he has reiterated hundreds of times that and Russia has no intention to attack Europe, but if the territories of Russia are being attacked, that they are intending to answer that potentially with all potential weapons used. Now, there was a discussion we had with a high-level source in Italy who basically said that, commenting on what is behind this Dragone formulation about hybrid, he said that in the language of NATO, this includes all weapons, including drones, and therefore it represents a small but significant step forward by NATO to launch a hybrid attack on Russia. But given the fact that most of the so-called instruments of what is regarded hybrid are not in the hands of NATO, but in the hands of the member countries, if there would be such a hybrid attack, one has to assume that Russia would answer in a non-hybrid way. So this is extremely serious. I mean, if somebody out of the NATO ambiance leadership circles threatens a preemptive attack on Russia, all alarm bells should ring and there should be a public outcry. But in the West, nothing of this sort happened. Instead, you had the NATO Foreign Minister meeting in Brussels, where they formally disbanded the NATO-Russian Council. This is not a very big loss because it was moribund since a very long time. But as another high-ranking military told me a little while ago, the fact that the only potential forum of dialogue between Russia and NATO is basically declared defunct is extremely telling. And it clearly, shows that there is no interest to go in any direction of a diplomatic approach to the crisis. Also, the NATO-Russia Founding Act was officially, disbanded. That means now officially Russia and NATO are again enemies or have an enemy status. So this is all an extremely worrisome escalation. Now, also in the German parliament today, there were several important votes. One of them that the parliament voted for the draft, the military draft for young people in Germany. Supposedly, this is only the draft, but not yet a requirement for all young men to serve. Young women, it is voluntary for the time being. But Pistorius, the defense minister, already said in an extremely bellicose way, naturally, if there are not enough voluntary people, young men accepting the draft, that there will be an obligatory draft. So given the fact that there is this incredible hype in Germany about the operational plan Germany, a secret document of 12,000 pages, which is now being implemented on all levels of society, where, the German army goes to the schools, advertising all the public transport are full of advertisements asking people to join the army. So it is quite a push in this direction. And, so today there was in 90 cities in Germany, pupil demonstrations of pupils who demonstrated that they do not want to fight a war for the rich. They do not want to fight a war for the warmongers. But the Ministry of Education and the school trade union had warned that if these pupils would not attend the school, it would be answered with disciplinary means. So probably several pupils were, harassed not to attend. But, it is definitely an expression of that the young people do not want to be cannon fodder in a useless war. Kujat, by the way, the former head of the Bundeswehr's general inspector and head of the military commission of NATO, again in an interview said that at no point, at no moment in the Ukrainian war had the Ukrainian army any chance to change, their road to defeat. So it was a lost affair from the very beginning. Now, the only other crisis spot, I should mention two more. One is naturally that the situation in Venezuela remains very hot, where now the Russian ambassador in Venezuela was asked if Russia would come in support of Venezuela. He said, if we are requested, we will consider it. Now, Marco Rubio, on his part, again came out and said that Venezuela is a place of influence for Iran and also the Hezbollah, obviously, trying to steer the flames there as well. Now, the only other crisis spot I should mention, naturally, the Gaza catastrophe continues. There is no earnest peace or ceasefire. The killing continues both in Gaza and in the West Bank. But the new crisis spot is what has erupted between Japan and China, whereby the new Prime Minister Takaichi 3 weeks ago had said that if there is a military attack on Taiwan by the mainland, then this would represent an existential security situation for Japan, and they would intervene militarily. They also delivered missiles to an island which is only 100 kilometers away from Taiwan. They're also negotiating to sell missiles to the Philippines. All of that has led to an absolute heightened tension between China and Japan, because in China, given the fact that we have now the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in the Pacific, the memories of the Japanese atrocities in the Second World War are extremely lively in the memory, and the situation could turn really much more serious. There are already severe consequences. Tourism from China to Japan has almost been stopped. Japanese restaurants in China are being, not frequented anymore. And this could escalate into a really serious crisis in the future. It is part of global NATO, because Takaichi a couple of days ago had a long, half an hour discussion with General Secretary of NATO Rutte, where she reiterated that the security in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific, and that of NATO are closely intertwined. And we know that global NATO is, having offices in Tokyo and so forth. So this is all extremely, worrisome, and puts up the necessity to really go for something which does not address only all the individual crisis spots which I have just mentioned, but to eliminate geopolitics for good. It is quite interesting that on the 9th of December, the Valdai Club has a meeting on Eurasian security, which has been pushed by President Putin again. He said there is an urgent need to have a new Eurasian security structure. And at that meeting in Valdai, there will be 40 representatives, but mainly representing Asian countries of the Eurasian continent. And I have made emphatically always the point that we need a new security and development architecture which takes into account the interest of every single country on the planet, or else it will be not sufficient. And if you look at this recent statements by Admiral Dragone, I think that underlines the point I have been making all the time. So let's put the idea of a new security and development architecture really on the table seriously, and let's think about ways how we can promote this idea more forcefully than we have done so far. And that's what I wanted to say in the beginning.
Thank you very much, Helga. I'll make sure to put the link to the 10 principles that you wrote around the idea of creating a new security and development architecture. I'll put that in the chat. And also, if you are on any other place where this is being broadcast, and you can find it at the Schiller Institute website, schillerinstitute.com. I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the agenda just because we're having some technical difficulties. I'm sure we'll resolve that very soon. Next, I'm going to go to Ray McGovern, who is a wonderful interventionist. He's a regular on the International Peace Coalition, former CIA analyst, and co-founder of the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And thank you so much, Ray, for joining us today. And please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anastasia. Can I be heard? I can.
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I want to thank Helga first for mentioning Primakov, who had a vision, which now seems to be being realized, where people can get together, even people who have traditionally hated each other, like the Chinese and the Indians. And there is progress, and there's reasons for accentuating the good news. Now, I notice that when we talked about that Italian general who was recommending that NATO consider a preemptive strike on Russia, I noticed that there's no simultaneous translation into Italian. So I'm going to start out on a lighter note and tell an apocryphal story. Now, translators of French, Spanish, and German, apocryphal, please tell your folks it means it's not true, okay? Not everyone knows it. Here's the deal. Italy has a secret weapon, a new tank, far better than the common European battle tank. It has 5 gears, okay? 5 gears, okay? 4 reverse gears and 1 forward in case of an attack from the rear. Thankfully, there is no Italian translation. This is a mockery. How can a high-level NATO official even suggest that a preemptive strike on Russia might do any good? Well, let me point out a couple other things here. There has been a lot of talk about how these various 28 points or 19 points or 20 points, the plan or the outline or the talking points really that were given to President Putin by Witkoff and son, Witkoff and the son-in-law of Trump, that they were dead on arrival, dead on arrival. That's not going to make any difference. Yeah, look at this point and that point. That. So there are people who are predisposed to think that Trump cannot do anything possibly good. Okay. I call that Trump derangement syndrome. And, you know, if you look at the big picture, it's hard to understand how a president who enables genocide, forced starvation, and could stop it by a telephone call, how he could do anything good. But I think we can discriminate, okay? There's good news as well as bad news. The good news is that negotiations with the Russians are back on track. People like the Italian general, people like Rutte, also mentioned here, people like General Kellogg, who has been shunted to the side, and even Rubio has been taken out of the action with respect to negotiating an end to the Ukraine war. That's good news. Now, as Putin, of course, is in India, and this is a big deal, as Helga has outlined. He gave an interview, Putin did, to Indian journalists. And just yesterday, we got the translation. And I'm going to read you just about 4 sentences because this is indeed the good news. He's asked by the Indian interviewer, so what really happened on Tuesday with Witkoff and Kushner? Putin, well, it's premature to discuss now. Now, I would point out that not even Trump has bloviated, has done his usual stuff. He's been keeping a very discreet silence. That is good. So it's premature to discuss now, says Putin. Frankly, it went 5 hours and I got really tired. 5 hours is too much. However, it was necessary because it was a productive conversation. I'm all quoting Putin here. We had to go through practically every one of these points for discussion, and that's why it took so much time. So it was a, quote, this is all quote, it was a meaningful, specific, very highly substantive conversation, okay? Now, Putin adds, look, Trump has taken upon himself because achieving consensus among conflicting parties is no easy task. He's taken it upon himself to negotiate here, and I believe he is sincere, Putin. I'll stop there. I think that's enough to give people, whoa. So maybe Trump is doing something that we didn't expect. Maybe he learned in mid-October he was being lied to by the likes of Kellogg and perhaps Rubio that Ukraine could still win. The Russians were disintegrating in their economy and losing tens of thousands of troops. Maybe he realized he'd been had. Maybe he thought, look, let's face into it. Let's see if we can get the best deal we can. And he famously said in one of those airplane things, he was on his way to Florida for Thanksgiving, and they asked him about this land. What about the territorial issue? And he says, "Look, it's all really up to the Russians." Okay, now you can say that, okay, we'll persist and we'll lose 50,000 or 60,000 more Iranian troops, but the result's going to be the same because the Russians are going to end up with that, whether there's agreement or not. The agreement might be able to stop that. Trump says, okay? So what we have here is a confluence. What we have a unique admission that, yeah, we're going to continue the discussions that were arranged and that were concluded in Anchorage, Alaska. We're going to get down to brass tacks now. And the overweening reality is twofold. And I'm the only one that puts it in twofold. First, everyone admits, as Helga has already said, the war is over. The Russians have won. Such Ukrainian troops that remain are in cauldrons. They can either be killed or surrender or try to desert. That's the overweening reality. The other is, well, it was typified by yesterday's announcement in the Washington Post that Trump has renamed the Institute of Peace. You know, the big Institute of Peace in Washington, it's now to be called the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. Now, do we have a little narcissism here? We sure do. During his cabinet meeting 2 days ago, the president mentioned that he still wants a Nobel Prize. He still should get a Nobel Prize. When do Nobel Prize nominations close? January 31st. Call me simple-minded, but when you're dealing with a delusional narcissist, things like having a Nobel Peace Prize matter, okay? So I'll just say that. And what else should I add? Well, I just should say that NATO has been marginalized. No clearer sign of that was the reality that for the first time that I can remember, I've been watching this for half a century, like 5 decades, okay? Never has a U.S. Secretary of State shunned a NATO meeting of foreign ministers. Never, okay? There's maybe one exception when Colin Powell was waging a war against Iraq or something, but never. This was an indignity. It was compounded by the fact that when Rubio's associates were asked to explain his absence, I mean, they didn't even come up with a lame excuse like, well, his daughter is acting in a Christmas pageant, or oh, he's not feeling really well, or oh, he's busy attacking Venezuela. They didn't even. Look. This was his reaction. Look, Rubio has so many meetings. You can't expect him to participate in any meetings. So, in other words, you have Rutte yesterday or the day before putting on what I don't know how you say in Dutch, a stiff upper lip, saying it doesn't matter that Rubio's not with us. He's with us in heart, and he's going to support. We have his support. Well, they don't have his support. Now, as some of you will remember, I've always seen this glass as half full, not half empty. Now I have, I think, pretty conclusive evidence that it is half full, and it can only be derailed if some false flag attack succeeds, And I think that that's not likely to happen because the Europeans already tried several of those and they didn't work. So what's my final thing? Well, my final thing goes back to the German expression, which you will recognize, Anastasia. Ein bisschen Spaß muss sein. Okay, you gotta have a little fun, that they say. Okay, and so I'm going to illustrate my last remarks, which are not only glass half full, I would say glass maybe more than a half full, by singing just a verse or two of an old song. Are you ready? Here we go. To illustrate my last remark, Jonah in the whale, Noah in the ark. What did they do? Just when everything looked so dark. Well, they said, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. Now, there's lots to be done. The people in NATO, the leaders of many countries of people tuned in here are going to do everything they possibly can for their own political, personal reasons to sabotage this. They succeeded in doing so from August 15th until about now. Now things have changed. Now Putin is saying, look, we could deal with these people. We think Trump is honest. I think he's honest too. I think he really wants to make a deal. Now, if part of his motivation, as I believe, is to get a Nobel Peace Prize, well, I said, all right, give him the damn prize, for God's sake. If he could do something good and people can discriminate between the genocide and forced starvation on one part and say, well, maybe we should not rule out the possibility that Trump could rise to the occasion in this specific area. And I do think he wants to prevent a nuclear war and a real sharp break in US-Russian relations. Call me naive, but the evidence indicates that not only he, but Putin want that. I've gone on a little longer than I thought. I hope you didn't mind my song, but I think a little lightness is appropriate for Christmas. And to illustrate my last remark, you have Noah, you have Jonah, and when everything looks really dark, you got to accentuate the positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ray. And I did appreciate your song, and I think many other people did as well. And if I haven't told you this before, have you considered joining the Schiller Institute Chorus? You have a really beautiful voice.
I would if I didn't live in a dacha in the outlands.
Well, maybe we'll come down to your house and we'll sing Christmas carols out
That
in
would be
front of
great.
your home. But no, thank you for that, Ray, and thank you always for your insights into what's happening in the world. Just to pick up from where you put things, there was actually a very interesting video that was put out from Dmitriev in Russia, who is the CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. He's a special envoy from the president. And he put out a very interesting video, which I think I'm going to show right now. Let me share my
Yeah,
screen.
Anastasia, but let me interrupt for a second
Go ahead.
because I didn't know who Dmitriev was, okay? But if memory serves, at the age of about 5, he was sent to a place like New Hampshire to live with an American family.
Really?
Before you knew it, he joined relatives in California. Long story short, they let him in the school without any knowledge of English. He ended up going to Stanford, getting a big degree in economics, then going to Harvard, getting his PhD. He lived in the United States for, I think, about 18 years, speaks
Wow.
fluent English. So, if you're thinking about this Dmitry, well, yeah, he's the CEO of the Russian Investment Fund, but he's sitting there right next to Putin and the interpreter and of course Ushakov. So Ushakov and Dmitriev are pretty much running this for Mr. Putin. And no clearer proof of that is the fact that an intercepted message between these two very high Russian officials on the 29th of October was leaked to the Observer. No, leaked to Bloomberg. Bloomberg published a text, and the text indicates that, yeah, the Russians just sort of given ideas for this draft. So the idea was to put the kibosh, to sabotage these negotiations by showing there was really a Russian draft. Well, in many respects, it was, but it was Dmitriev and Witkov and Kushner and Umerov, the Ukrainian, stopped by for those discussions in late October in Miami. Okay, so Dmitriev is a heavyweight. Okay, and Putin is relying on him for a lot, and particularly to entice Trump to entice Kushner to the idea that, hey, there could be terrific financial and economic benefits for a better relationship between the U.S. and Russia. Thanks for letting me intervene there. I'd love to see
No,
that little.
I actually didn't know that about him.
Yeah, since we are giving little intros, Dmitriev is also the person who brought the issue of the Bering Strait tunnel into the discussions at Alaska, which was the basis for which the now continuing discussions are being held. They were accentuating the positive, I would say. And it was this idea of the Bering Strait tunnel, which of course goes back centuries, but politically it goes back to the work of Lyndon and Helga LaRouche with people both in Russia and the United States to really bring this forth as an example of the basis on which U.S.-Russian relations can and should prosper. And he called for AI-generated videos to be presented for an award on what this Bering Strait tunnel should look like. Having said that, all right, Anastasia, take it away.
And just the last thing before we get to that video, just going to say we are waiting for Mrs. Purnima to hop on from New Delhi. Unfortunately, she's having some issues with reception. So I just want to make sure that everyone knew that, and thank you for your patience. We will. Oh, I see, Ray, you've.
Yeah, just another footnote to this, and thanks so much, Dennis, for mentioning the tunnel. Okay, there is an engineering artist-generated graphic of what this tunnel would look like from I think it's from the Alaska side. So these things have been actually worked on, as was said, for decades. The engineering sketch is available. I think it's available through a publication that I would like to advertise, and that is the EIR, the Executive Intelligence Review. Look it up, find the picture of that, find the representation of what it looks like. It's not at all impossible given the technology available today. They were even thinking of it as Dennis said, centuries, not just decades ago.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ray. And with that, here is the video. Let me share sound.
Hello, my dear friend. I've been sailing for a whole month to get here. I'm very tired. We need to do something about it.
As we know, time is also distance only measured by speed. That means it can be reduced by changing the medium of movement itself.
You mean, instead of overtaking the ship, we should eliminate the ocean?
Look, Thomas, it's only 100 kilometers here. The sea separates us.
Shall we go under the sea? An interesting idea, Dmitry Ivanovich, but not realistic.
There was a time the light bulb seemed to be a magic thing.
150 years have passed. The dreams of engineers have become blueprints. Blueprints have become roads, and roads have become bridges between people. Sometimes a dream is not a fantasy. It just takes time for it to become reality.
Now, if there was any AI video that I think should win an award, I think it's this one. It's pretty fantastic. He posted this on his X account. Let me just grab the link for everybody. if people want to use it. I'll post it in the chat for the Zoom meeting. If you go to X, you can find it at K.A. Dmitriev. That's his handle. You can find it there on Twitter X. So anyway, please share it around. It's super fun. It's really exciting, and I think this would be a pretty fantastic step in the direction of actually ending geopolitics, were we to create this Bering Strait tunnel, which was really done very well in this video of what it could look like. Unfortunately, I do not see Purnima on. I think we're still having some difficulty with the connection. So what I think we should do, we have a few other things in the agenda. We have a video that we can show right now, and then we also have organizing reports. And why don't we go to the video first, and then we'll come back and see if Purnima's here. Recently, Harley Schlanger, who people have seen on here just last week and in previous IPC meetings, and if you watch his shows, his programs on the LaRouche organization website, he did an interview with Avi Shlaim, who is a professor at Oxford University. He's a historian. He wrote a number of books, actually a couple of new books, but one of the books is titled The Iron Wall, and also his autobiography called 3 Worlds: Memoirs of an Arab Jew. And I personally found this interview very enlightening and useful, coming from someone who's been in the middle of many of these discussions for many years. So we'd like to show just a portion of this interview for people to get an idea and to be part of the discussion period today. Why don't we pull that up, please?
Now, just to give people a sense of who you are, I'm going to reference your 3 books that I think are the most crucial for understanding the current situation in Southwest Asia. Now, just to give people a sense of who you are, I'm going to reference your 3 books that I think are the most crucial for understanding the current situation in Southwest Asia. You wrote a book, The Iron Wall, which actually looks at the whole history of the security situation surrounding the state of Israel. Your second book that I'll mention is called 3 Worlds: Memoirs of an Arab Jew, which is sort of a journey from Baghdad to Oxford, but a very insightful example of how autobiography can be real history. And then your most recent is called Genocide in Gaza. Now, I'd like to start with that because you wrote in the preface that you were reluctant to call what was going on in Gaza genocide. What changed your view?
Even after the Hamas attack on the 7th of October and Israel's ferocious response to that attack, I was very reluctant to use the term genocide. Genocide is a very big word, and genocide is usually associated with the Nazi genocide of the Jews. So it seemed almost perverse to accuse the Jewish state of perpetrating genocide. And in my autobiography, which you just mentioned, 3 Worlds: Memoirs of an Arab Jew, I'm very critical of the Zionist movement, especially of its attitude towards the Jews of the Arab lands, of Arab Jews like my family and myself. But I write, for all its sins, Israel has never been guilty of genocide. After the 7th of October, I was forced to change my mind. It's not that I changed my views, but the facts changed, and therefore I had to reassess my position. And the turning point for me was when Israel suspended all humanitarian aid to the civilian population of Gaza. This constituted the use of starvation as a weapon of war. And if you are depriving civilians of water and food and fuel and medical supplies, you are trying to kill them. If that's not genocide, I don't know what is. So I changed my mind. I think Israel is guilty of genocide. And that's why my last book, the collection of essays, has got genocide in the title. It's called Genocide in Gaza, Israel's Long War on Palestine.
Now, to go to the present, there's a debate on the Trump peace plan. Will it work or not work? I saw a very interesting column from Gideon Levy 2 days ago where he said, this is a chance that perhaps there'll be a change. There are many others who are saying don't expect a change as long as Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and others are there. What are your thoughts? Do you think this can succeed, the Trump peace plan?
The Trump peace plan is not a peace plan. It's a very welcome initiative to stop the war in Gaza. And more specifically, it achieved 3 things. It brought the fighting to an end or near end. Israel continues the bombing. Secondly, it secured an exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. And thirdly, it allowed the resumption of humanitarian aid to the civilian population. So it's a very positive initiative, and all of these things were urgently needed. But to call it a peace plan is not justified because it says nothing about the future, and all the provisions are very vague, and essentially it's a colonial plan for the control of the Gaza Strip. And so there is going to be an international board chaired by Donald Trump, and all the members of the board would be foreigners, foreign leaders. And under the board, there would be a committee of Palestinians who are described as non-political Palestinians. That is to say, not members of Hamas, not members of Fatah, not members of the Palestinian Authority, but individuals who are acceptable to the foreign powers. In other words, quislings, handpicked by the foreign powers. And then there is going to be an international stabilization force. And the mandate, the task of this force would be to disarm Hamas. Now, Israel, the IDF, has failed to disarm Hamas after 2 years of relentless bombardment. So how would this vague international stabilization force be able to do what the IDF couldn't do? And secondly, what Arab country would agree to send troops to fight Palestinians, to fight Hamas? And one other question, what Arab country would agree to give money for the reconstruction of Gaza when Israel could destroy everything all over again? So this so-called peace plan is not a peace plan. It's a colonial plan to help Israel maintain control, permanent security control over Gaza. The plan doesn't give any agency to the Palestinians. What is extreme is that it doesn't just rule out Hamas, but it also rules out any part by the Palestinian Authority. There is no provision for elections or for democracy. Normally, after a conflict, You would expect the people to have an election and to choose a government to govern them. Here, everything is imposed on the Palestinians from above. And there is the vaguest of reference to a Palestinian state. What it says is that the Palestinian Authority needs to reform. It doesn't specify the reforms, and it doesn't say who will decide whether the reforms are satisfactory. But if the reform takes place, then the conditions may be created for a pathway to Palestinian statehood. So you really couldn't get anything vaguer than that. And what we know for a fact is that Israel is totally opposed to a Palestinian state. Trump doesn't support a Palestinian state, and therefore it's inconceivable that this so-called peace plan is going to lead to an independent Palestinian state. It's really a stitch-up between America and Israel. And from the beginning, Zionism depended on external support to achieve its aims, and the state of Israel has always depended on external support, on American support. And today, Israel is isolated because of its record in Gaza and its war crimes, and America is increasingly isolated in its support for Israel.
Let me just take a couple more minutes of your time to present to you the idea that Lyndon LaRouche came up with as a way to get out of that trap. He said that you need to have incentives for both sides to live in peace, and that those should be not in the realm of political agreements, which can be torn up very easily, but economic cooperation with mutual benefit. And he drafted something which he called the Oasis Plan of canals between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea into Israel, where there could be desalination plants to produce fresh water to green the desert. And he said, this is the way that you can create a mutual benefit that could outlast or actually overcome the long history of vengeance and retribution. What do you think of that? It was obvious that there were economic accords in Oslo, but they never started moving the soil and never started building them.
I think it's an imaginative idea and a positive idea, economic cooperation leading to a political solution to the problem. And Oslo envisaged that to start cooperation in specific fields, economic fields, and build mutual trust and gradually increase the cooperation and the scope of the agreement. And Oslo did work for the first 2 years until terrorism was reduced to nothing, because 70% of Israelis and 70% of Palestinians supported the Oslo Accord. It gave them hope for the future. But with the assassination of Rabin, hope was lost, and there was nothing to replace it. And Netanyahu never agreed to concede national rights to the Palestinians. But he did believe in giving them economic incentives. But this policy hasn't worked, and it cannot work, because the Palestinians are not a rabble. They are a nation. They are people with very advanced political consciousness. They want an end of occupation. They want independence and sovereignty. And no amount of economic incentives are going to change things.
I think that this was a very useful interview, especially in gaining insight from someone who is an an Arab Jew, and his views on this whole process that have been happening. You can find this interview. I'll include the link in the chat here. One moment. Make sure I have the right one. There we go. You can find this interview as well as many other interviews at the EIR YouTube page. Please go to the YouTube page. There's a series of pretty fantastic interviews, insightful interviews that that I think we should definitely get out broadly. So please use them for your organizing. Now, unfortunately, we're still having technical difficulties. It's really unfortunate because Purnima was in the middle of this youth forum in New Delhi. She's the president of the BRICS Forum in New Delhi, and I believe she was with the president. There was a whole dialogue with the president, with the youth. So when she does get on, we'll bring her in. Otherwise, we'll plan to have her on next week because this is very important given the response that we're seeing from Putin and Modi. Is very inspiring. So how about we go to Helga and Ray to see if there's any reflection so far for the discussion, and then we'll continue.
Well, I just think that the new developments with the BRICS countries taking a much stronger role, I would hope that maybe when President Trump goes to see President Xi, I think in April of next year, that maybe if we keep organizing for the Oasis plan internationally until then, hopefully latest then there could be an agreement, because if Xi and Trump would agree on building the Oasis plan together, I think Trump would deserve not one Nobel Peace Prize, but two. And maybe that would be, I know, I'm kidding. I don't want to make a very serious matter sound ridiculous, but I really think that if there is any hope under the present circumstances for the Oasis plan to be implemented, it would be an agreement between Trump and Xi. And, given the fact that, I mean, I know that the situation between the United States and China is much more complicated for many, many reasons than between the United States and China. But, maybe momentum can be created, and hopefully that can be put on the table. Because also I think the idea of having to have a new security and development architecture is something which could gain a lot more momentum and get much more into the conscience of many more people. So it's a matter of organizing for it rather than being despair that it's not there.
Yes, I would agree, Helga. And I would also say that the economic side of things is very important, and the involvement of Trump's son-in-law, Kushner, I see as a salutary development, even if it just means that economic and financial considerations with respect to Ukraine and with respect to China are super important. Now, I made a couple of notes of what you just said, Helga, and the Belt and Road Initiative need not be a threat to the United States. Now, Trump has been, I've been warned not to use the word brainwashed, okay? So Trump has been conditioned to seeing the Chinese as the main adversary. They're going to be all important and we got to stop them. Well, he was aided and abetted by a fellow named Eldridge Colby saying, the next war is against China, right? Okay. The only thing is that China is about several thousand miles away. Lines of communication are very, very labil. And all the military exercises show that in any war between the United States and China, guess who would win? China would win unless there was a resort to nuclear weapons. Now, the way I reconstruct things is in early September, I think it was the 3rd, there was this maximum show of military, economic, and demographic power when most of the leaders of most of the world appeared in Beijing to celebrate the defeat of Japan in World War II. Trump probably wasn't invited. He certainly wasn't there. None of the Europeans to speak of were there. It was a maximum graphic demonstration of the tectonic shift in power away from the West toward the East. Now, in my imagination, I see Trump saying, my God, those people there are really getting close and they represent most of the world. What are we going to do? And Eldridge Colby says, we're going to fight them. We're going to build more ships than they do. But somebody more reasonable, don't ask me who that could be, says to Trump, look, number one, forget about separating China from Russia. They're united as they never have been before. And secondly, we wouldn't win any war with China. So we have to show our strength. I mean, for God's sake, we can't appear to be paper tigers. So what can we? Well, I know what we'll do. We'll limit our new strategic plan, the defense guidance, to our own hemisphere. Okay, let's deal with the Western Hemisphere and also the situation in our own country. We're going to need our troops to put down dissent in our own country. And there was one report, I think was out of Politico. It said this is exactly what Eldridge Colby was prompted or asked or demanded to do. And all of a sudden you see, oh, Venezuela. Okay. So I see Venezuela the same way I saw Grenada. Now, Grenada is a small island in the Caribbean, right off Venezuela. Okay. In 1983, very briefly, 241 US Marines were blasted to death in Lebanon. Reagan withdrew them, said this is really stupid. No more Marines in Lebanon. But what else can we do? We have to show our strength. I was around in those days, right? I was moving at pretty high levels. And Weinberger, the defense secretary, says to Reagan, I know what we can do. There's a leftist leaning group in Grenada. And Reagan says, but that's in Spain. No, Mr. President, not Grenada, Grenada. Okay, it's a small, you probably never heard of it, but they're threatening to take our medical students hostage. So let's send the 82nd Airborne in there and we'll get rid of those pro-Cuban and we'll free the hostages. Now, I know for sure that the government, so-called of Grenada, cried uncle. That is, they said, look, we'll send the students back in the next plane. But the die was cast. We had to show our military might. Now, sorry to go into all that detail, but I see a direct parallel there. Here is Trump asking, can we really beat China? Can we really divide China from Russia? And somebody sensible says, forget about it. That's not going to happen. Well, what can we do? We can threaten Venezuela. Besides, Venezuela has a lot of oil, and Venezuela is pro-Cuban. So it's almost that simple. Now, will he invade Venezuela? I have my doubts. I mean, what would that happen? What would that mean for the rapprochement with Russia that has been breathed new life into? Pardon my grammar, but I think it'll be a real step back. I'm hopeful that they will beat their breasts and finally Trump will talk to Maduro. Maduro will make the nice sounds and might not happen. This is more a prayer than an expectation, but it's possible given how I look at why this Venezuela thing has cropped up. Sorry to hog the time here, Helga, but I'd be interested in what you think about that.
I think concerning the strategic shift to the Western Hemisphere, I had been thinking actually something quite like that, because I was wondering, why is this emphasis on the Western Hemisphere all of a sudden appearing? But then you look at this article, I think the guy's name is Elliot Abrams, is that correct? In any case, he wrote an article in the Foreign Affairs where he bluntly states, that the real purpose is to have a regime change in Venezuela because Venezuela is the hub for China, Iran, Cuba, and Russia. So, given the fact that the Chinese have increasing influence through such projects like the Chancay port in Peru and the Bioceanic Railway, it's not to be excluded that they would like to get China out of the entire Latin American area. While, we think that this would absolutely aggravate all the problems of the migrants because, it would cause new refugee waves. It would cause more bloodshed at the Mexican-American border. And, I think that the untenable, in my view, untenable policy of the administration to get rid of all immigrants, so-called legal and illegal migrants from countries from the global south. These are all people who have jobs normal Americans don't want to do. Gardening, service sector, cleaning jobs, all of this. So I cannot imagine. Plus, it's really a extremely brutal way how these ICE troops are ripping people. You have migrants who are living in the United States for 20 years and have a job and so forth. Now they want to go to the lawyer to get their status legalized, and then they're being picked up by ICE troops. This creates an atmosphere of horror, and all of that would not be necessary if one would convince Trump to not try to chase out the Chinese of Latin America, but to cooperate with them to build up these countries, including replacing drug production with agricultural production, creating jobs for the refugees to stay home and build up their countries. It would be so much more in the interest of the United States to cooperate with China rather than trying to keep to the idea of dominance at a moment when the rest of the world is moving into a multipolar cooperation based on sovereignty, non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. The four initiatives which have been put forward by President Xi Jinping, the global security, development, civilizational, and governance initiatives, together represent a wonderful package to resolve these questions. And Putin has reiterated again his proposal he made for the first time already in 2022 for a new Eurasian security infrastructure, which only refers to the Eurasian continent, but it's thinking in the same direction. And I'm absolutely convinced that the only way how we will avoid a catastrophe, including one which would come out of the pending financial crash of the global financial system, would be that we in time get the European countries and the United States to agree for an orderly reorganization and a new security and development architecture, which emphatically must take into account the interest of every single country on the planet. Now, I think if that, in my view, that is not a maximum demand, that is the absolute minimum demand for us to grow up as a human species. So what do you think about that?
I think that's a vision that cannot be denied. It's a vision that cannot be implemented in the next weeks, months, or maybe even a couple of years. We need to work toward it. And we need to look at the OASIS plan and other plans, which would contribute to the introduction of this vision. My own focus, as you know, Helga, is much more on immediate things and what Trump is thinking. He's only got 3 more years, and maybe just maybe, he's different from Biden. Now, the Russians, for example, called Biden неговорно способный, okay, not capable of reaching any sort of agreement. Well, now, they weren't even capable of talking to the Russians. That was big. Now it's different. We're talking to the Russians. Witkoff saw Putin for 5 hours on Tuesday, and it was the 6th time he spoke as a representative of President Trump. That's big, okay? So are the Americans able to conclude agreements? I think, contrary to what the impression the Biden administration gave, the answer is yes. Putin recognizes that, and I think we're very fortunate in having such a careful, methodical person who's devoted to not letting things go out of hand, especially with respect to letting U.S.-Russian relations fall into a state of complete disrepair. Now, how about China? Well, Trump is a realist. He's learned some hard lessons on Ukraine, namely that he's been lied to. Maybe, as the months go by, he could see that what the Chinese are saying might have some sense. They're saying, can't we just get along? I mean, what about a win-win? We have no irreconcilable differences. It's not like Biden said. Recall that Biden, 2 months into his administration, got up one day and said, the Chinese are pretending or intending to become the richest and most powerful country in the world, not only economically, but strategically. That's not going to happen on my watch. Guess what happened on Biden's watch? Not only China economically, but Russia strategically, on strategic armament. So maybe, just maybe, Trump can be brought along to realize that, look, the U.S. is not what it used to be. It's not the U.S. that Biden believed in, apparently, and tried to force his way. It's not going to work anymore. So what do we got? We got a realistic sort of thing. And maybe the Chinese, when they meet in April, maybe Xi Jinping will say to Trump, look, I think you've been misinformed. I think you don't need to labor under the residue of the Biden administration. I mean, after all, this is what I would imagine Xi Jinping would say. You know, the Russians tell me that they were on the brink of nuclear war at the end of the Biden administration. We Chinese think that's crazy. I mean, some of our people are saying, well, yeah, it was that auto pen, you know, that Sullivan and Blinken were fighting over the auto pen to direct the Secretary of Defense to start a war. Luckily, the auto pen malfunctioned. Oh, maybe that's making too light of it, but it was really bad then. So if Trump can be persuaded to say, Ukraine's not my war, well, maybe he'll see the light and say, you know, China's not my war either. Besides, we would lose, and besides, too much in the economic realm is at stake. Now, that's not only a hope, that's an expectation, but it's going to take a couple more years for it to be realized. In my view, I always have a myopic sort of near-term outlook on things.
That's exactly why I think we don't have all that much time. You know, I mean, I'm living mentally a lot in the strategic situation, because if I would live inside Germany, I would get totally depressed. So I'm trying to avoid that. But nevertheless, I can't miss the situation that what's going on in Germany in particular is really horrifying. You know, I mean, the war hype is unbelievable. The way how everything is in the you know, militarization of the industry, the brainwashing of the population, the media. you listen to any of the mainstream media, and there is not one news item which doesn't have a spin. It's a full-time bombardment, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I cannot see how that is not going to have the danger of something horrible happen, which may be a false flag operation which does succeed. So I'm not so on that. I'm not so complacent. Otherwise, I'm very optimistic, and I think the number of adults in the room gets larger. You had a very good meeting between Lula and the discussion with Trump, which is progress, given the fact that before there was an adversarial relationship. And very important, the Pope, who is an American Pope for the first time, he mentioned the coincidentia oppositorum as a concept, as something, not as an academic concept, but as something which has to hold different tendencies together. So maybe one should think more to bring all of these factors into play to reach this new paradigm I'm convinced we have to reach.
I would agree completely with that, Helga.
Yeah, just so people have it, I included the link to the CUSA package with your open letter, Helga, after the remarks from the Pope and also Father Harry Burry. I put that in the chat. Dennis Small, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, there's a very interesting question that came in, which I think should be brought into the discussion here related to the Bering Strait tunnel. And let me just preface it by saying that the long term has an uncanny way of becoming the short term under certain circumstances. And I think that this issue of the U.S.-Russian relationship is actually our leverage on the situation, agreeing with both of the speakers. In fact, Ushakov, the presidential advisor who was seated at the table in the negotiations with Witkoff, as Ray mentioned, reported after the meeting a couple of things. He had a very brief report, and he said two things of particular note. One is this was an extremely positive meeting, very encouraging, very substantive. It's language and terminology which has not previously been used even in all of the previous meetings. So that's one thing. And then secondly, very significantly, not responding to questions, but in his own opening remarks, Ushakov said, and we also discussed economic cooperation between our two countries and the tremendous importance that this could have. And he said, maybe we also should have some concrete examples of this to get the ball rolling. I wonder what they were talking about. I don't certainly know. But here's the question that came in, and it relates to this matter. This is from Regis, don't know. Given that the Bering Strait rail link is already envisioned as one of the most important infrastructure projects of the 21st century, would the group, meaning I guess this group, consider it desirable or even advantageous to expand the concept beyond the rail crossing itself into a larger binational development zone? Specifically, a jointly developed mega region on both the Russian and American sides, including the Diomede Islands, that integrates advanced logistics hubs, eco-industrial parks, research centers, and future-oriented settlements. In other words, could the Bering Rail Bridge Tunnel serve not only as a transportation link, but as the anchor for a transcontinental world trade village, a model region for peaceful cooperation, sustainable development, and the world's largest Arctic innovation corridor? I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on whether such an expanded vision aligns with the group's long-term goals and values. Very interesting question. It definitely aligns, and just a few comments on this, more than aligns. This is the World Land Bridge Network, which the Schiller Institute developed many, many years ago. And you can see that the Bering Strait Tunnel project, from our standpoint, is only one of an entire world network of required infrastructure, not simply rail corridors, but actual full industrial corridors. Lyndon LaRouche specified 100 kilometers on each side of industrial parks, fiber optic networks, rail lines, industrial cities, advanced agriculture, and so on. And our number one project is exactly that Bering Strait tunnel. It can be exactly what Regis was referring to. But in addition to that, other major, what would otherwise be choke points of world development, involve the Darien Gap linking South American development, including Venezuela and the Caribbean basin, up through Mexico and the United States and to the Bering Strait tunnel, crossing over to the Eurasian high-speed networks that exist. Number three, the Kra Canal tunnel project through Thailand, which would greatly improve trade, maritime trade to and from China. And of course, the Gibraltar Strait Tunnel, number four. There are many others that could be indicated, but this kind of gives you an idea. The point here being that this not only all can, it all must be done together. But a starting point is exactly this Bering Strait tunnel, precisely because we've got some political leverage on this at this point, exactly along the lines of what Ray and Helga have just been discussing, which is we've got something in motion around President Trump and President Putin. The British and the Europeans are doing everything they can to sabotage it. They haven't yet. They'll try again, or they'll try in Venezuela or in Taiwan. But that concept can be leveraged on the China question. It can be leveraged on the Caribbean Basin question. It can be leveraged to bring the long term into the short term very quickly by having an entire change in the global security and development architecture. So I thought that question was of great interest, and I wanted to throw that into the discussion and see if either of the other, the two panelists have anything they would like to add or subtract.
Well, if I may go first, I think this is very, very interesting, because if you remember that in the little video of Dmitriev, Mendeleev says...
Dans la vidéo de...
Could the French interpreter go into the French channel, please?
Space and time,
Yeah.
Start again,
French,
Helga.
please mute.
Yeah. Start again.
That the that space and time sort of are, you know, relative in that way by building infrastructure. And that is a concept which I think anybody who has thought about great infrastructure projects sooner or later comes to that conclusion, including Lyndon LaRouche, that, you know, the more developed the world becomes, the more important density of infrastructure becomes, because time becomes a larger factor in the production process. This is why, you know, Lyndon LaRouche developed this concept of the development corridor, not just the transport line between A and B. And Friedrich List, for that matter, you know, he had a beautiful vision where he said that once the infrastructure of the whole world is going to be interconnected, people will think completely different. They will think as the one humanity in ways, you know, which has been completely impossible as long as the infrastructure was not there. And I think that that is, you know, in a certain sense, people have to just think about the longer arc of history, you know, where at a time before the locomotive and the train was developed, you know, it took months and months, if not years, to travel. Once you had the railroad, it was reduced to weeks and eventually days. And, you know, soon, I think when we have the super loop, you can travel 1,000 kilometers per hour. And then, you know, you can basically take breakfast in the morning in one continent and have lunch in another one, and dinner in the third one. So I think, you know, the future will be completely different, and we will look back at the discussions we are having now, you know, as being those of troglodytes who didn't really know yet what potential there existed. But so I'm absolutely convinced that the long arc of history is in line with the physical properties of the universe, namely that it's anti-entropic, and that eventually we will reach a situation where, you know, the idea of Vernadsky and the domination of the noosphere over everything in the biosphere will become the obvious question. So the amount of human creativity and human reason will be in proportion bigger to everything else going on. So therefore, I think the glass is more than half full. It's actually almost full, except we have to get rid of these remaining little problems which are in the way right now. But I think this is I think the more people look at this Mendeleev video and make more, actually the call is to make more AI productions of that kind, the better the imagination is stimulated, because I think the biggest problem is if people are running out of ideas and visions, because visions are not what Helmut Schmidt thought. He said, if you have a vision, you have to go to the psychiatrist. I think a vision is what defines the beauty of the future. I'm sorry, I have a little cold.
I think the Bible says, without vision, the people are lost. I applaud the vision of Lyndon and Helga LaRouche. They've always been decades ahead of everyone else. And, if you do that, sometimes you end up in prison, but your work carries on. Now, I too am a visionary, but I was also a current intelligence officer. And my role now is simply to say, yeah, great vision. What are the obstacles? And the obstacles are what I used to laugh at. The Russian Pravda used to talk about, catch this now, in Russian, Volsritsky Karavapitsy. And that's not a Russian word. I looked it up now. Then I looked at Volstritsky, Wall Street, Kravapitsy. Krov is blood. Heat is to suck, so is the Wall Street bloodsuckers. Now, during the Cold War, I'd laugh at that. Oh, come on, Wall Street here. Oh, look at 2008. Look at where we almost are now. These are the people that Eisenhower warned against, the military-industrial complex. And I'll just finish by saying, he also said, that is, Eisenhower, in his farewell address, he also pretty much instructed us, the Schiller Institute, to do what precisely we are doing. And that is to help educate people, to help them get beneath this blanket of propaganda. The way I put it was that the only antidote to the success of the aggrandizement of power by the military-industrial complex is a well-informed citizenry, okay? That's why I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. That's why all hearers and all watchers need to adopt a kind of visionary way and tell their neighbors, don't be bashful, don't feel ashamed to take a different view of them. And by, I think this is what, the 131st weekly session of our group. By it's going to work, and the vision will be achieved. And it's just going to take Trump a lot of time to realize that there's more money and there's more Nobel Prize work in cooperating with Xi Jinping when he says, why can't we have a win-win? A win-win is possible with the kind of vision that Lyndon LaRouche and Helga have long since tried to teach us.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for that. No, and likewise, we very much resonate with everything that you've done, and I think we're absolutely holding the torch it's not just the creation of the United States, it's been multi-millennia of people who are holding up this concept of a republic, which isn't explicitly American, although it's expressed itself in that way in the history that we have in the world. But you see this idea, this concept of the beauty of mankind represented in every nation. And I think that's what's actually bringing us all here together right now, is to accomplish that mission. So thank you so much, Ray, and thank you everybody who have been participating in this to become the educated citizenry, to uphold the best concepts of humanity. I do think we have a few organizing reports from Mexico and in Germany, just giving a heads up to Christoph, who's also an interpreter as well as a political organizer out in the streets. Just giving you a heads up right now. We'll go to you after Alan. So first, we have Alan Rivera from Mexico, and it was so wonderful to meet you in Paris, Alan. You guys have been kicking a lot of butt in France, and I really appreciated your organizing reports and the table setups that you have, which I'll bring up in a moment. But please go ahead, Alan.
Hola, Anastasia, muchas gracias. Hola a todos.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was very happy to meet you and to meet everybody. And it's almost a month since that a great international conference in Paris, November 8th. And right here in Mexico, we have been working in the streets, organizing the population. We have been in a dialogue, and I will show some images and you can observe our deployments. I just wanted to tell you what is the response from the people in Mexico. We were campaigning about the idea of the cooperation among BRICS and with BRICS, and we have a banner on the BRICS countries and people. We are in a very busy area in Mexico City, and we could see how people, we found all kinds of answers, but there was a lot of interest. There were people, some of them already knew about BRICS, even though they didn't have a lot of details, but something that I was very happy that a lot of people came because of the map, of the BRICS map, where you can see the Earth and in the map and the importance of the BRICS and some of the projects that have been developed. And so people were interested, and they were telling me why this is a different map, because normally we see America in the left and Europe in the right. And this map is different because you can see the rest of the world. And it's interesting. And this has made me think how this vision, this change of paradigm about these nations of the East are presenting a new paradigm from the economics, the vision. So we are transmitting about the transatlantic economy to the an economy on the Pacific in the other side. And also, but that word Pacific comes from peace. It comes from that word. So that was interesting. There was people are curious and they come to us, and some of them just come in because they want to know what the map says, and they want to know about BRICS, and they want to talk to us and leave us their contact information, and we are inviting them to the International Youth Conference. And I want to take advantage about this. And so here we are, the literature from our organization, the Silk Road becomes the land bridge, the world land bridge, and you can see, and then the Green Deal, and other pamphlets that we have published. And we tell them, and so we are inviting them to the international conference, youth conference, from which will happen on December 14th. And we want everybody to participate and invite youth to be at this conference. And also when we are organizing, we are inviting youth, teachers. And I think that's it. And in Mexico, the reaction for BRICS is very interesting, because the people who know about BRICS can see is something positive, but because of the situation of the government in this case, what they see that they are afraid of the pressure coming from the United States and the financial powers, because they are afraid that the exports, because the Mexican exports are linked to the United States. So that's the detail, that's the situation, that there is a positive response, but they think is something very difficult to accomplish because of the pressure coming from the United States and the impact on the Mexican government. And because of that, has that intention. That's why Mexico imposed tariffs to China and other nations, and said it will not join BRICS. So we are organizing and we are presenting the optimism, and this is what we need to do, and we want to accomplish this. I wanted to tell you about that. So we are having good deployments in the streets, and that's it from me. Oh, I also want to add, I want to mention also, a person came by, and because it's a very busy area, and there are people, one person saw the BRICS banner, and he said, yes, it's very good, long life BRICS, and he continued walking, saying long live BRICS. So we are getting that type of reactions when we are organizing in the streets.
Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. If anyone is in the area in Mexico or in
Así que cualquier
America,
persona, sorry.
Please reach out, and if you want to organize with us, please join us in the street. I do see that we have Purnima on. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's very, very late for you, and you're coming off a lot of really excellent work. I want to go to you next. Miss Purnima Anand is the president of the BRICS International Forum in New Delhi, and you're coming off of a very successful youth forum in New Delhi with the president. And thank you so much for making the time to join us today and to report on what's going on. And you have the floor. Please go ahead, Purnima.
Thank you, Anastasia. Hello, Madam Helga. I'm very sorry for late, but network problem was there because I was in the Moria Sheraton Hotel where President residing. So there they jammed the phones, I think. Then I came out and I am talking to you. So it was really very interesting visit of President Putin in India. And from yesterday, Modi ji is looking after himself, his visit plans, and he received himself from the airport, and then they went to the Prime Minister house first time. It happens in the protocols of international law that such meeting held like this. And then today he was having very hectic day, and we signed many agreements in defense sector, in education sector, in nuclear energy, and rare earth metals. So many things are new with India, and I feel that Russia is ready to do everything with the synergy of India. So their policies are open. Their 7 ministers were here, and I think more than 200 Russians organization, media people were there, and all places, many events were happening in Delhi. So it was good atmosphere, and India-Russia relations announced at the highest level. And I feel that both President and Prime Minister of India and Russia, they are mutually agreed to do many new things. They make the $100 billion USD plan for new economic cooperation between Russia and India. So this is also very big initiative. And from our side, on behalf of BRICS International Forum and Youth Forums, we organize very big linked program with the young people. And it was Vision for Future, where young people send their congratulation message and friendship message and peace message, especially because you are doing a peace coalition conferences between young people. I talked to Helga Madam also long back about young people cooperation. So we initiated this dialogue with the young people and we launched the hackathon for scientific cooperation in BRICS countries. So this all we did, lot of activities during last 2 days. And Russia TV channel, they opened their Indian office and today president opened it. So this is the first media entry, Russian media entry in India. So these are the informations from my state, New Delhi, about the president visit in Delhi. And we are doing a lot of things. We want to cooperate with the Schiller Institute, Madam Helga and Anastasia, and I am listening your conferences regularly. And it is really very interesting dialogue that we are inviting very important speakers who are speaking without any fear, without any political lines. So this is really interesting to hear the realities in this forum and in this online meetings. This is all I like to say because time is short. I think I am late. So I said my words and we want cooperation with your institute as well as if we can represent your institute in Delhi, in India and in BRICS countries, I am ready to do our joint cooperation for mutual cooperation, for healthy world, peaceful life for the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Purnima, and thank you so much for joining us so late and all of the work that you're doing. I'm sure Helga also would like to respond to you, but we would love to work with you. Helga, please go ahead if you have a response to Purnima.
Yes, hello. I'm so happy to hear what you are saying, because I think that if the young people of the world come together, there is, no mountain which cannot be moved. So I just want to tell you that on the 14th of December, this is the next Sunday next year, not this one, next Sunday, we have an international Zoom conference basically to try to bring this international youth movement idea a whole qualitative step forward. So maybe if you could help to bring a delegation of young people from India to report about this meeting, because I think, apart from what you are doing already, the young people in Europe urgently need to hear from the young people of the global south, because from my experience, there is such a huge difference. Whenever I talk to young people in Asia or Africa or Latin America for that matter, they have a very optimistic idea what they want to do, how they intend to solve all problems of underdevelopment, how to create better futures for their lives. And that optimistic view is so absent in places like Germany, for example, where, today, we had this demonstration against the military draft, and that was already suppressed by the authorities. So I think for the young people in Europe and the United States to hear the outlook of people from India, from other countries of the global south would be extremely important. But can you tell us a little bit more what the young people reaction was to this meeting between Putin and Prime Minister Modi?
Yes, we organize this program in hybrid format. We sit in the Delhi at Mandapam because India-Russia Business Forum happened in Mandapam Pragati Maidan. And there today president visited. So we didn't got president time, but we organized one hybrid hub in the Pragati Maidan. And then from all over India, different universities, students connected. online through YouTube and Zoom channels, and they send their peace message, friendship message, their ideas for India-Russia friendship. So this all, so more than I think 10,000 students connected, and number is more because I didn't calculate it, because in one university 5,000 students are connecting. We just get the idea that okay, 1,000 or 500. So like this, more than 20 universities all over India connected. So this is my rough idea that yes, 10,000 students connected, but number is more because 5 lakh tweets is done by university, Delhi University. So many students are working, very big team is working. I only coordinated from Delhi, from the hybrid conference, and we said thanks to their vice chancellors. Some places their vice chancellors also connected with us. And in Delhi, 2 universities organize program like festival in their universities. So it is like a, inspiration in next generation for India-Russia relation. And when it connected with president visit and many news, so they feel good, because I was feeling that from many years after COVID and this war, our young generation was not understanding India-Russia relation, warmness of India-Russia relation. So we just try to put up some efforts to touch the young minds. And this visit touched, because I hope everybody likes Putin in India nowadays. So it was good visit and good efforts.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I included in the chat the invitation to the December 14th youth conference that we'll be having. And I've been on some of the discussions of the preparations for it. It sounds like it's going to be a very excellent conference with lots of young people from all over the world, in particular from Africa. But we'd love to have people from India and Ibero-America and Europe. So please, the more the merrier. And we welcome you to the conference. Thank you so much, Purnima.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Madam Helga.
Wonderful. Well, I think we'll continue with the reports, if that's okay, Helga, unless you have anything else. But we'll continue with the reports. So I'd like to go to Germany. We have a report from Germany with the student protests that have been taking place. As Helga was discussing, this draft proposal, the draft of Germans to of young German men to go fight Russia is now on the table. And in 90 cities, there were these protests all over Germany. And Christoph was on the ground, as well as other organizers and other IPC participants. So why don't you go ahead, Christoph, and I'll pull up the images for you.
Okay, thank you, Anastasia. Yeah, it is true. It is true that we had protests in about 90 cities in Germany. It were, after my calculation, it were about between 30 and 50,000 youth which took part in that demonstrations. You had between 100 and more than 1,000 youth per demonstrations. In Berlin, you had actually 2,500 participants. And during the demonstrations, the German Bundestag, the German parliament, actually decided to make that new law, introduce that new law, pass it, which says that we will have this draft starting with next year with young adults. And it is not mandatory yet. But as you can see here, this is in Stuttgart, where I am from and where I organized. Here we had about 800 youth. who took part in that demonstration. They had first several speeches by youth, and then they made a march surrounding the inner city. It was interesting. It was rather spontaneous, the demonstrations. You see here that there were not that many banners and flags which they waved, but they made clear that they definitely don't want to become cannon fodder for the wars of the rich and powerful, as they claimed. And it is interesting that they realized that it is necessary to go to the streets, even if they didn't have the permission by the government and by the schools. Some of them actually had, but it was announced before the demonstration that it could have consequences. But as you can see, a lot of them still took to the streets. What was lacking, in my view, yet was that they didn't have a clear vision, exactly what was discussed right now here in this field. They had no clear positive vision what they wanted to have instead of that draft or mandatory draft, but at least they made clear that it is their future and that they want to be part of the decision what has to be done in the future. And I think that this will continue. I don't think that was the last day of demonstrations because the government didn't didn't try to approach them, didn't bring them in contact, didn't have discussions with them. So that will proceed in my view. That's what I have. Oh, and by the way, one last thing. We from the Schiller Institute organized in at least 4 cities, distributed leaflets, distributed newspapers, and tried to make contacts, especially for the youth, to invite them also to this youth meeting, which will take place in 9 days. Yeah, that's what I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for that report. And I think this is a very important development. I mean, the government isn't exactly asking them if they want to go fight. They're just telling them to go do this, which is if they don't fight now, then I don't know when. So it's a good development to see young people in the streets doing this. So we would definitely want to encourage that. If you are from any of these protests and you'd like to speak during the discussion period, please hop on. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Any ideas, criticisms, or support that you might need. So I just want to encourage that as well. I think we're approaching going to the transition for the discussion period. Yes, let's do that. I'll make the announcement to continue to the discussion period. If you're on over YouTube, Rumble, Twitter X, or wherever this is being broadcast, and you'd like to participate during the discussion period with the speakers today, you must be registered. Please go to the schillerinstitute.com website. Right on the top of the web page, there's a RSVP page. Just click on that, sign up for the Zoom link. It's the same Zoom link every week. You'll get an email with that Zoom link and you can hop on. And with that, Dave, just let me know when we've transitioned to the